Welcome back to the technical update series with PNNL here on Get a Grip on Lighting. On today's show, we have the great and powerful Andrea Wilkerson. She's back, that's right, and her colleague Sarah Safraniak. I hope I got it right. She's going to correct me in 1 second if I didn't pronounce her name right. I should have asked her before we started recording, but we're rolling now, so we're going to keep it going. Andrea is a senior lighting research engineer at PNNL, supporting the U.S. DOE lighting R&D program. She earned her doctorate from Penn State and her BS and MAE from the University of Nebraska in the respective architectural engineering programs. Andrea serves on the IES Education Library and Office Lighting Committee, the IES Marks Award Committee, the IALD Education Trust Board of Directors, and the NCQLP Exam Committee. Sarah is a lighting research engineer at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. That's right, we already said that, but we're good to go. Sarah received her bachelor and master's degree in architectural engineering from the University of Colorado. Her current research involves conducting lighting simulations and field evaluations of advanced lighting systems in support of the U.S. Department of Energy Solid State Lighting Program. But before we go there, Greg, we got to get a little Coopered up here. Go to cooperlighting.com. That's COOPERLIGHTING.com. Greg Eric.
That's right. And as a business unit of Signify, the world leader in lighting, Cooper Lighting Solutions delivers forward-thinking lighting solutions and an industry-leading portfolio of indoor and outdoor lighting controls and smart lighting systems that improve people's well-being while making buildings, homes, and cities smarter and more sustainable. These solutions are specifically designed to simplify and personalize lighting, solve complex business challenges, and leverage data insights to meet customers' unique needs. Please visit cooperlighting.com to learn more.
COOPERLIGHTING. And now we're going to get into mining tunable lighting controls, which is something I've been looking forward to for a couple weeks now. Greg, why don't we kick it over to you to start off the questions?
Well, that's exactly what my question is. It's mining data and tunable lighting controls. Why tunable? I get the lighting controls, but why the word tunable in there? That's what sticks out to me. Andrea, you should kick it out for us.
Yeah, so as we've sort of talked about in the past as well, there's been a big emphasis on how tunable lighting can, you name it, it'll solve all the world's problems, right? And part of my question has been, do people even like tunable lighting, right? So let's just start with the basic, do people want to be in a space where the lighting is changing? And so sort of through this emphasis on really understanding, hey, the new technology that's up and coming in the industry and trying to document occupant response to it, we came upon a few projects where we've actually been able to gather the data of how people use the control station in these tunable lighting projects. So now we have 3 projects where we've been able to see, okay, do people override when the lighting program automatically changes? Or if it's, a simpler system like a classroom, how are people interacting with these tunable lighting systems? So, that's really where it all started, is just trying to understand occupant response.
And Sarah, do you have anything to chime in on that?
Yeah. Well, and I'll say, lighting systems are becoming increasingly dynamic. And so it's not, just all on or all off anymore. The lighting system, especially tunable lighting systems, right, could be on to a range of settings. And so, collecting the data and understanding how the lighting system is being used, as well as what might occupants be experiencing in the range of tunable lighting conditions, all of that is valuable and possible with the data we're collecting.
And I think today, our conversation, we just, what we do is documenting systems that are pushing the boundaries, which is why tunable lighting has been an emphasis. But at the same time, I think a lot of things we're talking about today doesn't matter if it's a tunable lighting system or not. It's really just wow, we have a chance to get feedback on lighting control systems. And we, as an industry, haven't done that yet. And so hopefully today we can even do a little brainstorming on what that means for the lighting industry.
Well, you know why? I'll tell you this. This is what I love what PNNL does. Because if I go and sell a tuning system, after the system is installed, I'm looking for a check. And then no news is good news. That's, if a customer doesn't call back, it means they're saving energy, they're happy with it, whatever. That's great for me. But it's the opposite with PNNL. They want to find out what the heck's going on with the system after it's installed, and their priority is not really a sale or anything like that. It's to say, did people use it? How did they use it? And the curiosity and trying to figure out in what ways they used it in unexpected ways that you didn't plan for, and looking at that data. So I'm really excited to find out what you guys have here. But quickly, before we go back to Greg, I'll throw it over to Andrea. The control station, was it on a wall that was like something they could just go and push and play with? Or was it a computer system?
In all of the 3 instances that we'll be talking about today, it's on the wall. So it's an architectural, a standard, what we'd consider standard lighting control station, not a touch screen or anything fancy.
So
like
intuitive
that.
for someone who knows how to use a light switch or a dimmer, they can go and play with the controls somewhat.
Well, what the data shows, maybe not so intuitive, but yes, that's the idea.
Okay, back over to you, Greg.
So, yeah, no, I want to dive into the 3 instances. What are they? What did you find out?
So real quick, there's a few of them. So Sarah led a project in 3 classrooms. It was a pilot in California, and they were just wanted to try tunable lighting. How do we use it in classrooms? And so we were able to collect data there. And that project's a few years old. And then the Nicu, so where we're able to, we finally wrapped up final analysis and papers on that, but where they had a color tunable lighting system and 72 patient rooms in that space, and then a behavioral health unit. And so they had tunable lighting everywhere in that project. Even the bathroom mirror lighting was tunable. And then the patients had control, not over the color, but they did have control over what was on or off in the space, and also intensity.
So let's. I'd like to dive into each one actually to find out a little more, because I'm in these, applications and trying to sell the project. So, Sarah, why don't you tell us about the classroom?
Sure, yeah. As Andrea mentioned, that project is several years old now. We have a DOE report on our website if you're interested in learning more. But essentially, there were 3 classrooms where a tunable lighting system was installed, and we were able to collect information on the button presses on the control pad in each classroom. So, every time they pressed the button on or off, every time they selected a preset, we got information about what button they selected, what time they selected it, and then, if they dimmed the electric lighting system up and down in intensity, we could see where they landed, and we could also see any adjustments they made to the color temperature of the electric lighting system. And what was interesting, right, is we looked at 3 different classrooms, and we saw that the teachers were using the full range of controls made available to them, right? They were dimming up and down, they were using color, and they were each using it differently based on, maybe the schedule of their classroom or their own preferences. And, one of the most interesting classrooms you could see every single day. It was very clear. The students may go out for recess or maybe go out for lunch. When they would come back into the classroom, the teachers would select a dimmer, warmer lighting setting for just about 5 minutes, and then they would dim the electric lighting system back up, something brighter, a little bit more appropriate for classroom activities. But there was about a 5-minute period 2 or 3 times a day where they would, I think, use the lighting as a way to communicate to students, it's time to settle down, it's time to settle back into the classroom. And it's just really interesting, again, to see how the different teachers use the lighting system as a tool.
Without getting too wild about it, was it different grade levels? Was it the same building, I assume, different grades? Were there different ages of teachers? Did that factor into this?
That's a good question. So it was elementary school. So again, the kids are going out to recess, and generally a younger, population of students. 2 of the classrooms, I believe, were classrooms for students who are on the autistic spectrum, and so special needs classrooms. Again, the teachers found the electric lighting system could be a tool for communicating with students via cueing. And then the 3rd classroom was just a general population 5th grade classroom.
Okay, and the results varied by type, or was it? in terms of each
Um,
class? Do they have different actions?
you know, it varied between classes, right? But I don't think that was necessarily the characteristics of the population of the students in the classroom. I think it
Sure.
was more dictated by maybe the teachers and their preferences and their style for, you know, communicating with students and structuring their daily activities. So
I think it's interesting that the teachers used it as a calming tool, it seems like or something like that, as a way to just, okay, you're outside, you're all excited, you're running around, kicking balls, whatever they were doing. They come back in, now it's dim, and then they change the lighting. The use is in fact the most important indicator. Non-use would be a negative thing to me, but the fact whether they used it one way or the other, the fact that they used it is super interesting to me as an as a additional, simple, quick educational use is absolutely fantastic. Greg, can we go to I want to ask about the behavioral health unit. Are these people that are suffering mental health problems? Is that what a behavioral health unit is, Andrea?
Yeah, it's a wide variety, and I am not a behavioral health specialist, but it could be uh, suicidal sort
Mm-hmm.
of feelings. Some are voluntarily admitted, and some involuntarily admitted. So it's really a wide range, I would say, of different struggles that people were having, and so yeah, a wide variety of the population. And I think, again, sort of building on what we found in the classroom, I mean, what was encouraging to me, it was a way to see, like, wow, like patients, they're using the full capabilities of the lighting system.
Hmm.
So now in this instance, they couldn't change the color temperature, that automatically changed throughout the day. But there was multiple zones in their, individual room, and they were using those zones. There's some lights over the desk, there's a light over the bed,
Hmm.
some general ambient lighting. So seeing that they were dimming too, and sort of what you would expect, okay, they're dimming up more in the morning, and they're dimming down more in the evening.
Hmm.
And so I think too, that goes broader than tunable lighting, but it's just like, okay, are multiple zones valuable? I think that simple questions like that, where in the lighting industry, we've never been really able to ask and like have that level of objective data that says, yes, like these are features that are utilized.
So it's interesting because these have to be those wall panels, because phones and computers are not allowed in mental health wards in Canada. I know that for sure. I'm sure it's the same in the States with behavioral health. They're not going to be allowed to have their iPad or an iPhone or anything like that, or a laptop. And so this idea of having controls that look traditional or that people are already somewhat familiar with, and now they're invited to, in the case of the classroom, tune the lighting, or in the case of the behavioral health unit, dim the lighting based on various different instances, and the fact that they're again using it is such a key indicator of success of the project. And the fact that you guys were able to measure that, I love this topic, and I love this uh, um, this future for the lighting industry, this tuning, basic, simple, inviting people to use it. What did the practitioners in the hospital, did they report anything? Did they use the system, Andrea? And how did they use it if they did?
Yeah, and Sarah can talk a little bit about this too, but yeah, I would say that was a piece I think where it's a little more confusing. I think it's because they didn't have a defined area of their own.
Mm,
So again, another interesting piece that we might not think about often enough is like, what are the dynamics when someone sort of is only controlling the space that they're in, or that they feel is their space,
hmm.
like in the patient room versus in the like broader, even in like the nursing spaces, maybe it would fit like 4 people max capacity, right? So it wouldn't be that many people, and you could have a conversation about like, oh, can I adjust the lighting? But we just really didn't see adjustments to the lighting in that regard. And maybe Sarah, do you want to touch on I think an overlooked group when you're thinking about designing a lighting system that we saw in the data?
Yeah, it was interesting. Initially we had been interested in understanding how the nursing staff were using the lighting, especially for their day-to-day activities. But we saw the most interaction with the control system in the security office. So again, this is a 24-hour facility. They have a security officer on site at all times. And the security officer has a dedicated office, right, that they can close the door and adjust the lighting. It's just them in that space. And yeah, we saw, again, regular adjustments to the electric lighting system. It was really consistent based on time of day. And then interestingly, a lot of response to automatic changes scheduled for the electrical lighting system, right? The lighting designers were really thoughtful about how the lighting system might transition automatically throughout the time of day. And we actually saw, based on those transitions, the security officer might make minor adjustments based on, their own preferences or maybe what they needed in the office, at that particular time. So yeah, an interesting, emergence of someone we didn't really initially think about. But
And
valuable.
the consistency, like every evening, that one a transition that happened, and again changing color and intensity automatically, that they could override. But yeah, it's like, wow, within what was it, a few minutes there, they're overriding that. And if you think about it, they're probably, they're staring at computer screens most of the time and thinking about contrast and all those things, or maybe they just really didn't like what it adjusted to. But that was such an interesting one where it's like, yeah, these sort of people that get missed when we're, interacting with the end user and the client. It's like often, we're not thinking about the security room. And yes, it was one room, but still they're there all the time. So you just kind of wonder, and this is where I think, taking this farther, right? Like our backgrounds are in architectural engineering, right? We think about lighting all day. We're not data scientists. We're not controls experts. We're really focused on the people in the space. But I just feel like there's so much opportunity for this sort of feedback and data for so many people, whether it's the manufacturers, the designers for feedback on what's liked, what's not liked, what's working, what's not. Even for commissioning. So I think that's where I guess I'm interested to hear, where do you see the opportunity to really leverage this kind of data? Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, of
You're
course.
allowed to ask.
You got to pick one of us, though.
The security, but let's go.
All right, Craig, you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Before I answer your question, I think that this idea of the ownership of space being a key driver to the use of controls is fascinating. You might predict that, but the idea that someone wouldn't trespass on someone else's lighted space, I think, is super intuitive into the psychology of how we use our lighting systems. And that is playing out in the data. The teacher is clearly in control of his or her space. And so they feel no problem going over and changing the controls and using them as a teaching aid. But the nurses don't feel like as if they're in control of the lighting of the patient's space, and they're respecting their use of it. And then you have the security guard who's, he's overriding it or doing whatever he's doing. I find that interesting. For me, I often try to keep it simple when I'm talking about tuning with customers. And I tell them that tuning to 2022 is like dimming to 1967. This is something that is going to be embedded in all lighting eventually. And so and people don't like me for this, but it has to be switch-based, at least initially, because I think we have enough apps on our phones. I don't think people want alerts from their lighting systems. I mean, early adopters, maybe they'll want to have that level of control. But I think the average office building or station, they want to look to the light switch. And then where is the light switch? And, I see there's a little thing that tells me here on my wall, my studio, it says, dim up and down, and then it says higher Kelvin, lower Kelvin on the switch on the wall. And so anyone that uses the studio here for a podcast can go and change the color of the lighting system, and they know how to use it intuitively because it's where a switch is, it's laid out the way a light switch is, and it tells them how to use it. I think that's so important to the future of this. And so which is why I've asked you so many times where the control panel is. My experience with customers is they don't want another app on their phone. Now, this may be untrue for new buildings, new construction, and it may be untrue for very large buildings where they want a centralized hub of control. But then that's not going to be on a phone either. That's going to be on a computer screen, right? And so I think if we want people to use tuning, then we have to make it by area, by each area, and then with zones with each area, which are switch based or look a lot like light switches, so that, or like dimmers, so that people can use them, maybe with a little bit of writing on it, whiter, yellower or whatever, redder, yet whiter, right? And that very easily, people don't have to worry about it. They can just go, oh, this is so cool. I can change the color, just like the teachers in the classroom. I think that's the future. The final thing is, circadian is a touch invasive into people's lives. And what you're seeing with the security guy is he's not liking that circadian change throughout the day. He wants to keep it the same, or he doesn't like the dimming or whatever. And so we have to decide, are we after circadian, which is prescriptive, here's what you get, sucker? You know what I mean? Or are we after choice? Are we allowing people to choose? And my belief is both of those things, as much as we don't like this term, are human-centric. Okay? It's both of them are the same, but they're opposites of one another, right? One is prescribed and the other is choice. And you can't have a prescribed choice, right? It's not going to work. So if you give people a choice, what do? They dim lighting. If you give them a choice, they always dim it, right? And so, Greg, that would be my thoughts, is when I'm talking to people about tunable lighting, I talk about it zoning, I talk about switch-based control, and I talk about eventually everybody's going to want to do this. So you can do it now and you'll have this color changing control over your lights. What about you, Greg?
So where I talk about it is when they ask about it, to be honest.
That's a good point,
I'm not proactively doing it, because the times I have, and including my own office right here, is color tuning, and I have all the capabilities. You can see it's off right now. Here's my sensor. It's not working for some reason, but I have the ability to change it to any color I want, and I don't do it because I don't know what's right. So what I want, and back to Mike's point, is I want an audit. I want a suggestion, like, here's what you should have, and then if I see it and I don't like it, I want to be able to change it. And I don't think we're at that point right now. Every time we've talked to anybody about this, I say, tell me what we should have. Give me at 8 a.m. it should be this color. At 9 a.m. it should be this. 10 a.m., 11, noon, down the line, and they all like, yeah, we have that. I'm going to send that to you. How many times have I asked Mike on a podcast?
Half a dozen times.
Half a dozen at least, and every time, nothing back. Nobody sends me anything. Nobody tells me what it should be. So until we can do that, until we can go to people and say, here's what you should have, but if you don't like it, change it, then you can't really sell it, in my opinion.
And I think there's a difference too. So like I'm considering getting into the skylight and sun tunnel business as a part of my business, because I find sun tunnels absolutely fascinating. So I did, when COVID started, I did my home with all sun tunnels because my children were spending a lot of time in their rooms. And of course, all the stuff we hear about light outside and all this kind of stuff, right? And so I found that nobody ever complains about, you didn't need any, in the second floor of my house, you absolutely didn't need any electric light during the day, okay? But the light level fluctuated massively throughout the day. Okay, and from day to day. And there was zero complaints about light level. People just accepted that natural light as the light level of the time. Okay? And even at night, you would get moonlight through the sun tunnel. And so you even had like a little moon. And what was super fascinating, if it was like a partially cloudy night with a full moon, you would see that thing dim and go higher and like very, very, if you're lying in your bed, there's something extremely sleep inducing about a sun tunnel that's moonlit. I'll tell you from my own experience, it just makes you fall asleep like that. It's so, especially when the clouds are going over the moon, it's like, whoa, done. So, for me, I think we're at the point, what I love about what you guys are doing is that switch-based control. If you give people switch-based control and they have ownership over the space, like a teacher or a security officer, you're going to see them use it. Whether that promotes circadian, though, is a tough call for me. I don't know how to say that to customers. So in the field, reports back, I know I want to talk about this Nicu because I feel like that could be sold. That's a selling feature. What you did, I remember it, and I want you to explain it to the audience now, Andrea and Sarah, if you have some comments on it. because what you observed in the NICU, I think, is one of the most fascinating queuing opportunities we have right now in front of us.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead,
I
Can
would
Andrew.
I?
say,
Oh, hang
go
on,
ahead,
Greg.
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 Sorry, I just need to ask one thing about the security, just out of curiosity. To me, if you're in security, you're working 24/7, you need to be alert. So were they choosing white color and bright light or dim color and warm light?
Yeah, in the evening transition, they would, I believe, increase the intensity of the light. So dim it up to a
Yeah.
slightly higher intensity, a little bit more light in the space.
Okay. Sorry. On to the NICU.
Mhm.
Yeah, and in general, we're just coming alongside these projects, right? So this is
Mhm.
more just a reflection, not necessarily what we think, but just what's happening
Sure.
in real spaces in terms of the wall-based control, etc. But so with the NICU, that was a similar situation to the behavioral health unit, in which there were some automatic pre-programmed transitions, including actually in these patient rooms that would transition off. And so there were actually just 3 transitions during the day. It'd be on at a warmer color temperature initially and dimmer for 30 minutes, and then it would transition to a brighter intensity, and then higher color temperature throughout the day, and then again transition back to that early morning setting, but in the evening during guest visiting hours. So that was a 2-hour time. And well, again, this was actually, again, one of our early projects where it was like, oh, like, are people gonna like this? Like, we had done the classroom project, but then this was our first project where it's like, there's this pre-programming. Are the nurses gonna like it? How are people gonna respond to this? And again, it was surprising that the nurses liked it. We did surveys of the nurses and we got to talk to them. And so when we were talking to them, asking what did they like about it, they said, "Oh, we like that it wakes up the parents in the morning." And we are like, "Oh, like, that's not what we expected." But again, it's just this like social interaction piece, where they were like, "Yeah, it's awkward to wake up the parents," which then you're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, yeah, I could imagine." But it's just something that, unless you go back after the fact of you put in this lighting system, how are people responding? I never would have thought about that piece.
Hmm.
So I
And,
think that's where
so,
it's,
but let me just clarify. So it started
yeah,
at whatever the wake up time is, say 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. It starts off, and you're talking about mother and baby, right, together in the NICU, correct?
yeah,
And
yep,
there's like multiple room. Are they in their own rooms? Or are they in one big room with
yes.
They're in their own rooms.
Oh, yes, own rooms, thankfully.
So then the lights come on at a very low level and a low Kelvin temperature, and then slowly increase to a higher Kelvin temperature and a brighter level over time.
Yeah, really, honestly, that it transitioned over a minute. So after 30 minutes, it transitioned over a minute, which you would think is too fast. But Sarah and I were in there, and really, it actually wasn't too fast. So, but
And
yes,
and
so it
and then so
transitioned.
the nurse comes in and mom and baby are awake.
Yeah, yeah,
Rather than, hey, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. See, that is such a wonderful application of theatrical lighting into the general lighting space. And it'd be so useful to people and actually very respectful as well to someone else's space where we need you to wake up now. But instead of us, hey, it's like a military barracks with, some sergeant running his baton down the beds. Wake up, suckers! Like a Full Metal Jacket style movie. It's just like naturally, and people are already awake. And you know what the best part is? The stakeholders told you that was so good. I
yeah,
really, really love that story. I think it's such a great future. Simple solutions for people like that solve problems but make life easier. Less negative interactions, less, work. In fact, and is there anything else? Was there visiting time or anything? Did they dim the lights at visiting time as well? Sarah, do you want to comment a little bit, or I see you shaking your head there?
Yeah, I mean, there were similar comments about the evening transition, right? So it was a bit longer, where the lighting system, during the day was cooler, more intense. It would dim at about 7 p.m., which coincided with visiting hours to, again, that warmer color temperature, dimmer intensity, and then would dim to off at about 9 p.m. And similar feedback where the nursing staff said, yeah, it's a gentle way of kind of letting everyone know throughout the 72-room facility that visiting hours are drawing to an end at 9 p.m. And kind of people naturally choosing to leave. So again,
Yeah,
helping the nurses do their job and focus more on the patients and less on, you know,
that is so
ending visiting
fascinating.
hours.
Like, I mean, like, yeah, I can totally in my mind picture it. You're seeing your mother. She's in the hospital. You're sitting by her bed. The lights start to dim. You start looking at your watch. Jeez, Mom, oh, geez, you're not even really noticing it. Like, if it's done well, you don't really even notice the effect, right? But then naturally people start to think, you know what, gosh, it's time to go home. And honestly, I don't know if you know, Andrew, but I'm also recently been hosting the Restoring Darkness podcast, which is another show produced by Nailed for darkness restoration and preservation. And one of the things I've always wondered is if street lighting could do a similar thing like that. As if you wanted a crowd to disperse, rather than turning the lights up and, having, more lighting is what the police will tell you. We need more lights. If you just slowly started to warm it and dim the lights, if the average person who didn't have bad intentions would just start saying, you know what, it's getting dark. Honey, it's or whatever. It's time to go home now. It's home time. Like, if we could, like, that intuition that you guys discovered, like most discoveries by accident, just by looking at the data and talking to the people in the space, if that could be applied, this idea of telling people what they should do right about now, without being forced. So we can remove the human interaction. We remove potential conflict. We remove conflict. Life gets easier. Right? I bet you that principle could be applied to a wide variety of applications when you want to tell the naked apes to go home. It's time for you to go home, and how we do that is we dim the lights really slowly and we warm the Kelvin temperature, and it gives you the feeling that the sun is setting. And I'm just like, kind of talking about it in a way that's non-scientific, but I think there's something to that, that where this idea, this bright light at night is removing our natural instincts for us to go home, to seek safety, to seek repose. It's time for bed, whatever. And I think reintroducing that in a multiple amount of spaces could have extremely powerful effects. Andrea or Sarah, do either one of you want to comment on that, or is it still just pure speculation on my part?
I agree. I think there's a huge opportunity for adaptive lighting at night. It's just, there's a lot of pieces to that. And I think I think that's what, the Restoring Darkness podcast has done, is really getting people excited about that, because it's just with outdoor lighting in general and the structures, particularly in the US, of who owns the outdoor lighting, et cetera. There's some things that have to change that are going to be hard to change. And so keeping that enthusiasm up. And I think, again, there's so many applications, and we sit behind our computer, especially too much in the past couple of years. But yeah, just like trying to encourage people to start thinking about how could we use this and really try and facilitate the responses we want out of people without having to say it's time to go home. And again, theaters, bars, they've been doing that for a long time, and figuring out how we can incorporate that into architectural elements.
Yeah, I think with bars, it's you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. But one of the things from the safety side, which I think is misunderstood by those that want more lighting for safety, and I'm going to put it in quotations in my hand. So if you're listening to this, I just did quotations with my fingers, is that when a police officer stops you on the side of the road and walks up to your car and shines a flashlight into the front of your car at night, the effect is one of contrast. He or she can see you, but you cannot see them, right? At nighttime. So if somebody shines a bright light on you, it's a one-way thing. The person standing in the dark with the bright light can see the person the light's shining on, and it doesn't go the other way. The other person is kind of blinded and scared. They don't know what's going on. So it creates this effect of, I better not move because I can't see that person. So that principle of that has been taken to street lighting. The problem with the street lighting, Greg and friends here, is that both parties can see each other equally. So the police can see the people that are potentially doing the wrong thing, but the people can also see the police. So the effect is not the same one as it is with the flashlight in the face or the prison lighting from the guard's tower. where they don't even know if there's a guard there because they can't see because the lights are so bright. So I think we need to re-examine these things, and your experiments are really showing us that there may be a seam we can go through here to use lighting to reduce conflict, all kinds of human conflict with queuing, and I think it's fascinating. Greg, I'm just like blew myself out there. I need help here. I don't
Yeah. No, that's good. So kind of going back to the beginning, Andrea, you want to know if people like tunable lighting. What did you find out after these tests? Do people like it?
I would say yes. Like people are using it. We didn't, there weren't a lot of complaints. We just actually finished up a project in an office. And it's, again, I wouldn't say like people are like ecstatic about it, right? But it's like acceptable and they like it, and I think again they're leveraging it, which is exciting to see as well. So so I feel like we can. I'm less worried about are we putting lighting in spaces and people are gonna be like, what? I don't want this, especially when you have some sort of control. And then again for us, having the control station is just a very interesting way to determine like, oh, is there something not liked? Is there something that can be optimized? Again, in the NICU, we actually looked at the data, and if the nurses didn't hit exam in the middle of the night, which turned on all the lights full brightness, they had the option to just turn on 4 down lights, but came on very dim. And you can see 100% of the time they're increasing the light level at night when they turn those down lights on. So then, you start to wonder like, and this is where it'd be interesting to like go back and like, okay, well, what if we increase that light level a little bit more at night? Like it's clear that, just turning these down lights on is not enough light. Could we see the use of exam decrease? Or could we see, would they just, the down lights is now an acceptable light level? Or are they still increasing the light level? So I think there's just like little nuances like that are also super helpful for the lighting designer to know. Like, okay, yeah, that light level, like I'm not going to do that again on my next project. And I actually, what's great about these flexible, advanced control systems is like, oh, I can change that too. Like I see that's a problem I can change. And then I also know that for the next project. And really ultimately it would be that this affects recommendations. And the other one I sort of alluded to earlier is just also like we get to see where it's like a little confusing for people to use the controls. You can see it in the button press data, and just what useful feedback that would be for the lighting industry. You think like, I think Word's coming up on its 50th or 40th anniversary of Microsoft Word, and it's still collecting data on us, right? To try and optimize our use of it, etc. Do you think like, okay, what other information do you need? But I think that's where it's like the lighting industry just hasn't taken advantage of the opportunity to gather feedback with data.
Sure. And you mentioned that you guys had an office study. Sarah, do you guys have plans for any future studies, more studies on this? I hope.
Hopefully, right? Yeah, and Andrea may be able to speak to this more, but we're definitely interested in getting into classrooms in particular, right? Understanding those a little bit more. Again, the original project we spoke about was, I would say, about 5 years ago now. So yeah, interested to get back into that application post-COVID.
Yeah, with a little larger, 30 classrooms is what we're hoping for with this next project instead of 3. And again, it would be primarily special needs. It's sort of what we've seen is that a lot of class or schools are able to justify it based on that. Although we might be working with a university here soon who's actually also trying to figure out, with neurodiversity, some people respond differently. How can we adjust the lighting in maybe like a certain part of the classroom for some students versus the others? Does that bother them? And the price point they gave on the difference between static and tunable, I was shocked at like, wow, tunable's not much more. It's really changed. And
Yeah,
so I think the university is kind of, again, looking at this like, okay, well, we're going to try it out in one room. But then if this goes well, then maybe that becomes our standard, is to use tunable lighting. So it's an exciting time now that price point's come down. I think that, like you said, it might just be the de facto. And I think even for reasons maybe we haven't thought about. So I know a hospital where they repainted because it was a brand new building, but it just felt a little too stark. And if they could have just changed their lighting, right? But it was just between the paint and the lighting, it just felt too stark to them. So I think that's also just, it'll be interesting to see all where tunable lighting takes us.
Painting could be a lighting move too, actually. Oftentimes, painting the ceiling of a factory will increase the light level more than changing the lights, to be honest with you. But yeah, if they had tunable, I would say what I've learned from this, just to summarize in my head here, is that number one, identify who owns the space. So who is in control of the lighting system. And then program the scenes or whatever the terminology we use on simple wall-based controls for that person. And allowing them to set different scenes, whether that's a teacher or a nurse or whatever. And the other thing is that I would say the Bluetooth is great, but if we need that switch-based model in the interim, at least until we transition to another time for people to be able to engage with these. And perhaps you can log into that switch with your Bluetooth phone and do more advanced controls or set things or whatever. But we have to allow people to override the system with a light switch. Otherwise, you're going to have this fussy situation that Greg Eric finds himself in right now, where
right.
it's fussy. It's got to be logged into. It's tough to use, and I find that these app-based control systems, as great as they are, need to be built with a switch, override switches in mind for it to have true market success in a vast majority of applications, because people are going to look to that. They're not going to look to their phone to control the lights. We are not going to overcome that in the medium term. I'm telling I'll tell you, customers do not want to hear that they need to download an app from the Play Store or whatever the heck it's called, and it doesn't work for Android Marshmallow 26.1 or whatever. They're not going to want that fussiness. Any final thoughts? Let's go to Sarah first to just
and I
wrap up.
I'll follow that up with the Folsom or the classroom study, and then the Nicu. And I believe with the behavioral health unit as well, there was some training, right? So there is a little bit of training that introduces the staff to how the lighting system could be used, more as helping them understand how it could be used as a tool. It's not, they don't think about lighting all day like we do. And so, just a little bit of training can go a long way for demonstrating the value to them of these tunable lighting systems. As we've talked about, we see them actually using it. And so that little training goes a long way.
Andrea.
Yeah, and I think I'll just piggyback on Sarah and thinking about when that training occurs. So a lot of times all the training when you're moving into a new space happens at the same time, which can be a bit overwhelming. And we even saw in sort of the surveys we did of the staff in the behavioral health unit that it actually took them at least 6 months to adjust to the lighting and the controls. So initially, when we surveyed them shortly after they moved in, they were not really a fan. And then about 6 months later, then they had grown accustomed to the controls. So just remembering that also, like, if you are going to put in the extra effort to do maybe some more specialized training, that maybe not when everything they're doing, days of training, is maybe not the time, especially when you are making a jump from static to tunable lighting.
Greg Eric, before we go, we got to give some props over to Cooper Lighting. That's right. COOPERLIGHTING.com. That's right. Cooper Lighting, Greg.
And I was going to bring it up in the podcast, but perfect time to do it. The one time I've sold this project recently, I needed to do it in a school. They asked for tunable dimming lighting. I checked all the sources I had, all the options out there, and you couldn't believe how difficult it was actually for this application to find it. But who did have this stuff was Cooper. Cooper Lighting has it. They're a world leader in lighting as part of Signify. So they've got all that. They are forward thinking. They've come up with solutions. And for this application specifically, they have it. So check these guys out, Cooper Lighting.
So just correct me if I'm wrong, because I think that's a massive endorsement for our
yes.
Our current sponsor on the show. You had a classroom in Minnesota and they wanted to tune the lights, and you went to cooperlighting.com and found what you were looking
You
for?
got it.
Yeah, that's all
You're
you
right.
need to know, folks. There you go. Go to COOPERLIGHTING.com. That's right, Cooper Lighting. And, of course, we thank you, the listener, the most important piece here, the people, all you folks out there. We love you guys. Bye for now.